We're very excited for being joined by Anna Osei, head coach at StFX. Thank you very much for joining us, Coach.
Thank you, Coach Anthony. I'm very humbled to be welcomed on.
We're very excited to have you. So let's go back to where it all started. When did basketball come into your life? Where did you grow up, and how did that kind of happen?
Well, I grew up in the Jane and Finch area of Toronto, and pretty much, government housing. My mom had come to the country when she was pregnant with one of my eldest brothers. And so for me, kind of getting involved in basketball was something to do that just wasn't getting in trouble. And I took a liking to it. I actually was a pretty big tomboy growing up. I love sports. I loved I loved that it was just me being free and away from, some responsibilities at home. And so that's kind of when I first started it. I was about 12 when I played for my first club organization, and kind of steadily throughout, I've had a ton of mentors and coaches that have helped me throughout the path. But 12 was when I really started to fall in love with the game. And so kind of going into high school, I spent a year up in Vaughan, Ontario, back when it was like the boondocks. There was nothing around. My mom, as well as her siblings, had kind of put some money together. And at the time, being so young, I didn't realize what she was trying to do. But she was trying to take us out of a really dangerous situation. Like, we would have shootings, every so often. We had a lot of drug addicts coming by, and it just wasn't safe. And so I didn't really understand it when I was younger. But we moved up to a semi-detached in Vaughan, and we were like we had no furniture for 4 or 5 months. We were just sleeping on the floor on carpet. And I was like, why would we go from being chill and being able to jump on the bus, and I could get to gyms, to kind of the middle of nowhere? We got no sidewalks, we have no furniture. And so that was kind of a challenge for me. I spent the last 4 years of my basketball career actually at Eastern Commerce, downtown Toronto. So for a little bit, my coach actually would he would leave from Toronto, pick me up from Vaughan, and bring me downtown Toronto for our preseason practices. And we'd be getting started at 6:15, 6:30. So it was long days. And then I would take the bus back home. It would take me 3 or 4 hours with transit and stuff to kind of get back up. And then I ended up moving to the city, kind of back to my old neighborhood. And I had some challenges at home, but it allowed me to play at Eastern Commerce. And I developed just a great relationship with our academic staff and my coach and my teammates. I was fortunate enough to play on some solid teams for AAU, and at the high school level, we won quite a bit, and we were back-to-back, provincial champions, which was pretty amazing. And then I was fortunate enough to get some scholarship opportunities down south. So the second I had an opportunity to go somewhere that was going to be hot with a lot of sun and it never snowed, I jumped at it. So it was a pretty quick decision-making process for me. I probably didn't do my due diligence enough, but so I went to the University of Miami, and I was there as a freshman. I got there a little bit under a semester early, just to kind of get situated and stuff like that. And my experience at Miami, I still remember it like it was yesterday. It was amazing. I was playing alongside McDonald's All-Americans, getting my butt kicked sometimes, but sometimes performing. And we had 2 other internationals. And so long story short, I ended up having to have surgery on both my legs. I got diagnosed with something called compartment syndrome. And what happened was our other 2 international kids weren't cleared to play because of amateurism rules. And we had a few kids who were hurt, more hurt than me. And so I was pushed and encouraged to come back quicker than maybe I needed to. And I actually was just going to redshirt, but it ended up being one of those things. And so I think that was the beginning for me of kind of feeling like, man, I just don't feel like my overall health is being prioritized. It was more like, we got to get this done by any means necessary. Academically, there was also some challenges because we had a ton of support. We had our own individual academic mentors, but, between scheduling for games and practices, I was asked to kind of take on a smaller course load, which I wasn't comfortable with because, I've always been really big on the academics. So I kind of made a decision after that year that wasn't the place for me. And, you know, like, again, playing at the BCS level, it's amazing. Like, there's a lot of perks that come with it. Competition is unreal. I have a few teammates who are still in the league right now in the W. It was great, but I made the decision to kind of make a move. And so in not wanting to sit out, I actually ended up going to Trinity Valley Community College. At the time, they were like what you would consider like a D1 JUCO, like a top 5 team in the country. And one of my basketball idols, Shannon Bobbitt, who went to Tennessee after she had went to TVCC and then went on to play in the WNBA. So she had given me a call and kind of, you know, really sold me on it. I also had a few high school teammates that didn't qualify, and so they were there. And so I went from like palm beaches and lizards and, you know, amazing that, you know, dynamic food and, you know, stipends, money in my pocket to be in the middle of nowhere in Athens, Texas. Like, on some maps, you don't even see the town. So like, we're talking like one movie theater, maybe, you know, 2 movies at a time. Nothing is walking distance, not even the gas station. You know, not a lot of means where, you know, we drive everywhere. It's very, you know.
Sounds like Last Chance U or something.
Yeah, it quite literally was. It quite literally was. Actually, Last Chance U, I really love watching it because TVCC, their cheerleading team is insane. Like our team was incredible, and so they usually go up against the bar and stuff. So it's funny you mentioned that because it really was Last Chance U. I remember me and my teammates would we would put some money together, and, you know, like, we would put money together to drive out an hour and a half in a cab to Dallas to go to a party. That's how you know, much we had to do to get out. So following that year, so I finished and I graduated with honors. I got my associate's degree. We went to nationals in Kansas. It was a great experience. Didn't do as well as we would have liked. And then I had verbally committed to another D1 school. But then kind of abruptly in the spring, my mother called me, and we had kind of some health issues with my brother going on at home, and then we also had some financial issues. So I made the call to kind of come back home, and I didn't really have a plan. And so I kind of came down and I worked things out with my mom. And so the agreement was that I was going to work for the year, like work full time, and the agreement was if I did that, I could be involved in basketball as much as I wanted in my free time. So I worked some pretty sketchy jobs, like some under the table cash stuff. Like, I was working overnight 5 days a week. And then what I did is I proceeded to email any and everybody I knew in the basketball community. And so I sent an email out to, like, you know, Ontario Basketball. I sent an email out to North Pole Hoops. I started writing with them. I started running some town identification camps. I started coaching with Team Ontario. And so those kinds of things, helping out at junior national team camps, just anywhere where I could get my feet wet. And that was kind of what kept me going. Unfortunately, throughout that year, my brother's health continued to worsen and worsen. And so by the end of that summer, he had actually helped me apply for a few schools in Canada. And I had no intention of, like, I wanted to do it as a backup, but at the same time, with how entrenched I was at the community level, I was like, okay, there's a market here, you know, something can come of this. Since I had been back, I had been approached by, you know, parents for recruitment consulting, athletes for skill development. I had American coaches and Canadian university coaches really wanting to get in touch. And so I, about halfway throughout the year, leading into the fall season, I started my organization called Canletes Basketball. And so what I did is, you know, I literally had like a phone and I had like a camera attached to my neck, and I would just go to events, and I focused a lot on the females because there was a lot happening for the guys. But I would go and I would do little highlight reels. I would write stories, recaps, tournament stuff, like a lot of the events and showcase events that I had participated in. And it got it received a lot of really good attention. And so I saw that there was a market there. And actually I had a talk with a few of my mentors, and one of them was Roy Rana, who now coaches in Sacramento. He coached boys basketball at Eastern, and he actually helped get me started in my coaching process, along with my high school coach. And he said, you know what, Lee, he said, you know, you're up against a lot in society and stuff. So, you know, as a young Black woman, like, you got to go back to school, you got to get your degree, like, because so many doors are going to be closed. And so it kind of had me thinking about it. There was a few schools I was considering, Laurier being one of them, where my brother had attended, but he was kind of like a brainiac. He didn't do anything with sports. And when my brother passed away, at the time, I had told Coach Falco at Laurier, you know, I'm not sure, I might just want to work. And, you know, he was like, we can help you out a little bit. This could kind of be your part-time job. And what did it for me is when my brother passed, there was a contingent of Laurier people that actually drove an hour and a half into the city for our traditional African funeral. And part of who came was the whole team. And I only knew one person on the team that I actually grew up with. And so that really, really hit me. And then I was like, no, I'm going to Laurier. And it was the best decision I made of my life, right? And I had an amazing 3 years. The staff was amazing. Our athletic director was awesome. Even the academic component. I was able to get more funding from kind of through my academic diligence than I did being an athlete. You know, I qualified and was able to receive some like awards of distinction. And so it was just like a lot that I didn't realize could happen at the U Sport level. And so we went to nationals one of my years. We were top 10 two out of my 3 years, and then I was a 3-time academic All-Canadian and an OUA All-Star. And so it was just the best. It was the best of both worlds for me because I was able to actually focus on my academics, and then I was able to have like an awesome university career. And so I think through all those 3 levels that I competed as a player, it was like I, you know, quite literally being in all 3, it kind of puts me in this position where I'm always trying to kind of shed light on different experiences and my perspectives. And not to say my experience is going to be your experience, right? But with the relationships I have in the community or with coaches, I always kind of just share my experiences. And it also kind of encouraged me to reach out to other people who'd been through the process, who'd played 4 years down there, who played 4 years down here, and kind of helping with that discourse. So being at StFX now, I still do that on a more informal level, but a lot of my playing just, you know, it allowed me the ability to kind of, you know, understand how it works from a business standpoint, but then also as a student athlete coming up, how important it is, like based on the scenario you're in, what is it that's going to work for you based on your interests and stuff. So that's kind of my playing career. And then I kind of intertwined it in there, but in terms of coaching, I started coaching while I was a senior.
Before we get to coaching, I got some questions. I'm sorry.
Sure. Oh, sure.
There was a lot of stuff there, so we got to talk about some of that. There was some real good tidbits. I mean, I think a big thing I try to tell people is find the right fit for you, and I think you're a perfect example of that. Sometimes you got to look a little bit longer than you thought you should look, and so Miami for you obviously was something that was like, you know, listen, I kind of want to go to Miami. Can we go right now? Like, what's the deal? So it's an appealing place to just say I need to go there, and then finding a place that would actually fit and listening to the people around you that say, hey, maybe take a look at this JUCO. This might be the spot for you to actually take your game to the next level and get your confidence back. Because I think a player, you know, that can play needs the confidence they have. So it sounds like from that JUCO experience, you created a lot of your self-confidence back again. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And it was just at a smaller school like that, you just get more attention. It's smaller classroom sizes. You feel like more than just a student code. Like I couldn't do anything at Miami without that student code, right? Like you can't book tutoring sessions. You can't, you know, like you lose something, like you better know what that 15-digit code is. So it really was just like a total juxtaposition of the two.
Yeah, and one of the things I've seen from coaches, I've probably done over 20 coaches now. We're going to keep going, but one of the things I've seen is a lot of the most successful coaches we have in our country, the path is not like this. It's up and down. It's over. You're going this way, you're going that way. And I think you're another perfect example of that. I mean, and then overcoming something like your brother's passing. My brother ironically passed away, so I was kind of getting a little emotional while you were talking there. But having overcome that, you actually realize that you can actually do just about anything at that point, right? And so going to Laurier and getting your education, what did you graduate with?
I graduated with a Bachelor's of Arts, and then I did a Master's. Actually, one of my one of our faculty members approached me and said, Lee, I think you should pursue your master's. I think you'd be a great candidate. And I was fortunate enough to get like a federal grant called the SHERC. And so that helped me get my master's.
What'd you get it in?
Master's of Arts in History.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, yeah. I mean, education is the key, right? I mean, like, we whether it's in the classroom or whether it's in life, you just need to be educated. And I think that's such a huge thing, getting your master's right away. So you finish playing, your team does very well while you're there at Laurier. You get into coaching. Tell a little bit about that and how that started happening, what happened there.
So when I had started, up until when I left for school, I was always kind of attached to kind of my father figure's hip, and he's really involved in the basketball community. His name is Ro Russell. So they call him like the godfather of Canadian AU basketball, but just kind of has done a lot for kids in the community. And so I was always kind of looking at things through a coach's perspective. And so I jumped at the opportunity to coach our junior boys team when I was a senior in high school. And within the community, I would help with some of our younger teams, our U12s, our U13s, and so forth, up until when I left. So when I came back, what was important for me is like diversifying. Okay, I did a little bit at the grassroots level. Okay, what other organizations can I help in? What about some writing stuff? I'm really passionate about researching. And so that was part of me putting out the feelers. Through some of that networking and working with Team Ontario, I actually was approached by one of the directors for our up and coming prep school programs. So at the time, the whole idea of prep was still relatively new, and so the Ontario Scholastic Basketball Association had just launched kind of the year prior, and I was approached about working a job, and it was like an opportunity to be a full-time coach. And there's a couple of things that went into that decision making. One is, holy smokes, I can do this as a job. And the other was, it actually, through the job description, it was going to help me more than the director knew. So dating back to when my brother had passed away, there was a lot of money and debt that was tied into kind of financing his education. So we ended up having to file for bankruptcy, and we were essentially homeless. So our family was split apart. So even when I had graduated, it was challenging. My mom was renting a 1-bedroom. My sister's kind of like across the way doing something else. I was living with a best friend. And so it gave me an opportunity to live somewhere. I was going to live with the student athletes that I coach. I was going to be a dorm parent. And it was an opportunity to kind of just, give myself full on to what I'm passionate about. And so I jumped at it. Now the experience was great because, again, having gone through one kind of recruiting process, and now we're kind of in this middle ground where, Canadians are highly sought after. We would have upwards of 100 kids, 100 coaches coming in throughout the course of the year in terms of watching practices, not even games, and going after some of our kids. So we had some national team athletes, we had some international kids. We would travel to the States periodically and play in events, and then we would also do unofficial visits. And so it was just great. And then growing the contacts through coaching, there was a few opportunities that came afoot. And, my biggest challenge in that was that I loved what I did and the setup was awesome, but I pretty much worked for free. And so I wasn't able to actually help at home. And in terms of, trying to help us get back on our feet, I wasn't able to kind of tackle some student loans and, like a lot of that kind of stuff. And so it was at the end of the spring. So I loved coaching the OSBA. We went to the championship game. We should have won, but we had a couple kids go down, and I wish we could go back to that. But it was an amazing experience. We had the league MVP, who's now Virginia Tech, and so forth. But my mom's husband, and my mom had gotten remarried. He actually gave me a call one day after our season was done, and he said, Lee, we love that you love what you're doing, but it's really challenging. And, Mom didn't want to tell you, but, she's going through some additional health stuff and a lot of the stress and trying to get us back on our feet. And so it really kind of hit me. And I was kind of at this crossroads of like, man, okay, I just got to do what I got to do. I have my degree. Like, let me jump on LinkedIn and see what's out there. And like, I mean, I had a little bit of work experience because when I graduated from Laurier and I was doing my master's, I was working in the Jane Finch area. I was working at Boys and Girls Club. And so it kind of gave me a little bit of professional development and, you know, just looking around and what's available. So I kind of jumped on and was looking for some jobs. And I kid you not, like within a week, I had 3 different people that I met through different walks of life talk to me about youth sport positionings opening up. And so the first time it was like my high school coach hit me up and was like, hey, you know, there's some coaching jobs that are available. Like, you know, have you ever considered? And I was like, I kind of blew it off. Like, no, there's no way. Like, you know, there's like 40 coaching jobs in all of Canada. Like, there's no way I'm going to get that. And then my former coach at Laurier hit me up as well. And he said, hey, Lee, have you looked at this? Like, there's some coaching opportunities. And I was kind of like, you know, I don't know. I'm not sure. And then I got an invite to go as an alumni to go to Laurier for a banquet dinner that they do each year called it's the Outstanding Woman of Laurier. So it was an award that I won in my last year, and they had like a 10-year anniversary coming up. And so they invited me as alumni, and I said, okay, great. And when I was there, my old athletic director actually approached me and said, hey, Lee, you know, there's an opportunity, you know, like at X, and he raved about it, and he said if he wasn't at Laurier, he would be at X. And the same evening, well, not really the same evening, but I had a coach with me at TRC Academy, who's now at StFX up here, but he had graduated from StFX. So I've heard a little bit about it, but I had no clue. And so he was always, you know, wearing the X ring and doing all that other stuff. And I kind of was like,
seriously, man, it's a serious thing.
Yeah,
it's not a
like,
joke. It's for real.
Yeah, like, how do you, like, where are you getting this ring from? Like, that's weird. And so when the opportunity,
they all have one. It's a legit thing. I've seen them multiple times, and I'm in Vancouver. It's a thing.
Yeah. So he was like, he hit me up like that same night, and he was like, Lee, you know, go for it. And so I did, and I sought some recommendations, and I was able to come up and go through the interview process, and it was just, I mean, I still say this to this day, I've never seen a place like Nova Scotia before. I mean, I came up here to interview, and like, you know, people were like kissing babies and giving hugs like they were related. You know, I was walking down the hallway, and the sidewalk, and I see like, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, who's that person talking to? Like, that's not Toronto. Like, we don't do that. Like, that's just
right.
Do that. And so I fell in love. It has a real hometown feel. I loved the opportunity of being able to work alongside some really, really big time coaches that I can learn from. Our athletic director is a former president of Youth Sport Athletics, and he's really big on inclusivity and just innovation. We currently host one of the Canada's first leadership academies at StFX, and so there's a lot of investment that goes into the student athlete process, and so I'm a big believer in that. And then I genuinely wanted to be like, man, this is going to be a great opportunity to turn this program around. And so I jumped at the opportunity. And it's funny because when I was going through the interview process, PEI opened up, and I had followed a little bit of youth sports ball, but PEI, you know, they had a few internationals, and they were young, and they just, you know, lost that AUS, and so I had started that process with them, because I wasn't sure how long that time frame was going to be. And, you know, the pitch was, you can come in, you can win right away. This team just went to the championship. The team's already done. You have a couple years to recruit, and, you know, it's a win-win. And then at StFX, it was like everywhere around our actual performance was like, holy smokes, like there's love, there's family, there's accessibility, there's this. And ultimately for me, like I've never been somebody who has gotten it easy, you know, like, you know, losing my brother, being homeless, like the whole nine, you know. And so I said to myself, you know, this, you know, is it going to be a tough decision? And then I kind of thought about it again, and I was like, no, it's got to be StFX. Now, I did have some friends that I reached out to who had been to StFX, and were like, Lee, it's everybody was like, amazing, great school, you know, hands-on experience early on, smaller classrooms, you know, and they're right. And it's a really, really great school. And so, I mean, the opportunity to come up here, and everybody talks about the boys club. and being the first female coach and really the only kind of Black female coach in the Maritimes, it has allowed me to kind of give back in different ways, reaching out to the community, learning more about African Nova Scotian history, and being a historian. I love that. So I've been researching a lot while I've been up here, but it's also come with its challenges, right? Like many people, many kids, I've never, have never had a coach like me that is loud and passionate, and I stick out like a sore thumb. And so it was an adjustment. I think on both parts it was an adjustment for people in the community as well as for me. But overall, I feel like I have a really good supporting cast behind me, and so that's what's keeping me going.
Yeah. So some huge points that you brought up, and from an outside perspective, I'm gonna pick up on a couple keys that I think are important. So one of those keys is make sure you're building your network. So if you're a kid growing up and you finish, you gotta build your network. You need to have people around you that can work with you and help you along the way, and you can help them along the way. Two, find some big time mentors. Coach Russell's actually the person who told me about you originally a couple of years ago when we met. He was like, "You should see this girl; she's the real deal." And so building those mentorship people and having them give you the advice you need so that you can, when you're ready, you can pounce. And then on top of it, dealing with adversity, right? Like one of the questions I ask people all the time is, what's one big adversity opportunity that you've had to overcome? Well, you've already given me like 10. So we're going to skip that question. But, it gets you to the place you are today. And so now all those, and then the last thing, one thing I tell people that I coach is sometimes you got to work for free. and it may not be fun, but you got to do it because you got to get the experience that you need, and you got to get the people around you that you need. And that, I think, was huge for you, just listening to your story, getting that experience, getting those opportunities, and really taking advantage of them. I mean, OU days is tough. Getting to the final is not an easy thing. I mean, people wait a long time to get to the final of that. So, a great story. So you end up at StFX. Obviously, the team's not very good when you get there, but a lot of the other teams on campus are very good there. So tell us a little bit about the experience of having to put your coaching staff together. Let's go over how you put your coaching staff together, and then let's go over like what are some of the core beliefs that you want to impart on your program and make sure that they take care.
Right. So I think one of the biggest challenges was and a lot of, this is at a lot of small schools and a lot of youth sports schools, but I didn't really have any money to go out there and get an assistant coach. And so what ended up happening is when I got down here in kind of late 2 summers ago, there was a gentleman from out west that actually was coaching at Douglas College, and he had inquired about coaching with Coach K. Now Coach K's got like 5 coaches, 3 managers, he's got a lot of support. And so he kind of directed that person to me. So Bill Hanna has been like my number 2 since I've come in. He got here like maybe a month earlier. He's got a wife that coaches and that teaches in our anatomy department. And so he's kind of like, we just found that we clicked instantly, and it's great because he was an analytics guy and I'm like a tangible, what do I see kind of person. And so together, we kind of were like, so what is a realistic goal for us with this group? And we knew from a culture standpoint, there was so much that needed to be done. But if you can imagine, we're talking late, end of first week of school that we're still seeing and meeting for the first time players who had been on the team. So I think it was important for us to feel like, it was important for us to show our team that, we weren't just going to X people out. Like it was a process of like, do you really like basketball? Do you really want to do this? Do you want it for more than just the gear package or maybe the clout? And so that was the whole point of that year, is who we're going to keep and who we're not going to keep. And I think I have a candidness about myself where like I'm really about trying to be honest and just trying to be as respectful as I can when I'm communicating honesty. I'm huge on communication. So like monthly, I would sit down with each player on the team and just with the transition of schools and then having a new coach, I would ask, regular check-in. How do we feel about our on-court? How is our mental health? What's your living situation like? and just making sure, and that there's some intentional blocked off time that I can give to each athlete. And I can't quite explain it, but part of the reason why it was such a struggle is because it was just a lot of unfamiliarity, I think, on both parts. Like, I was just unfamiliar with working with athletes that didn't want to work hard, or that looked at competition as a bad thing. They didn't want to play one-on-one. And so for me, it was hard to understand, because I'm like, how could you not want to do this? This is a recipe to success. You work for it, you make mistakes, you fail, then you try again. Like, that's what it's about. And throughout the year, we kind of saw who was over here and who was over here. And unfortunately, close to the end of the year, we had players that really didn't care about our values as a department or our team rules. And it unfortunately led to me not coaching kind of for almost 8 or 9 of our last games of the year, which is like almost 50% of our games. So what ended up happening was, my athletics department really looked out for me, and I just said, you know what, I would feel more comfortable just being able to come in with the players that I'm comfortable with. And maybe in hindsight, that's something that early on, maybe I shouldn't have been as, let's give it a try. But that's just the kind of person I am. I've never been one to just kind of take something for face value. I genuinely believe, like, if you know better, you do better. But if you don't know, then I can't really blame you for not knowing. And that's kind of been my approach to just being involved in the sports community. Sometimes people just don't like each other, and they'll try to, well, don't talk to this person. Oh, I heard this. And I'm like, I can't judge people like that, because what if people judge me like that? What if people just assumed something was true because somebody else told them? And that was the approach I had with the girls. And I was warned against it by some, and some people commended me, but it kind of came with its positives and its negatives. Now, one of the things that helped me out is the ability to recruit, and especially some of my former players and young women that I have grown up kind of working with, and so forth. And so we kind of went after some key players that we really felt like, hey, let's bring them in for this 2019 season and we can make something happen. And so that kind of was the goal for year one. We knew we had to recruit a lot, and we need to figure out who's with us moving forward, who's on this energy bus. And not to say it was never about you're a bad person. I think it just had to do with ways that, we
sometimes
were conditioned.
It doesn't fit. It's not a fit. You gotta go. Yeah, 100%.
Right. So that's kind of what year one was about. And it was really, really challenging. But, I think, like you had mentioned, anytime there's some adversity, like the opportunity to bounce back from that. And, again, I try to lead with integrity and just honesty. And I'm a faith-based person. So I really believe, like, God has things happen for a specific kind of reason. And so, surprising to the surprise of many, we probably brought in the best class of first years in our conference, and probably across the country, like in terms of one class. And I think we were the only team in the country that for a large part of our season, we started 5 rookies. But in doing that, I knew coming into year 2, I couldn't, 2-a-days, 6 days a week. And, so I knew, I sat down with my coaching staff and we kind of talked, and I said, look, we got to pick and choose what's important for us. Is it trying to get a couple wins now because the bar is so low, or is it prioritizing student athletes and knowing, hey, once you go from high school to university, there's tentatively a 15% drop off. If, we're a destination school, almost everybody's away from home for the first time. We're talking about the first 8 weeks of school, we call that the red area, when you're talking about mental health and first aid, and what that means for students, the peer pressure. Like, so there was a lot there. And I was like, yeah, if we're going to ask these kids to play 35 minutes a game, we can't burn them out. And so I told them, I said, look, we're supposed to peak in February, but we're just going to have to take it as it is. And so we just kind of like 1 week throughout the preseason, and then we started to come along near the end of the year. But I would say, outside of the wins and losses, we've had so much success. I mean, we are now recognized in our community. We do a bunch of community outreach. We work with our junior X-Women group, which is like our young basketball group. We go to the old folks' homes. We do a ton of team bonding stuff. You know, the girls get so much out of it. We have, we have people that can help our students academically. And so to me, again, it's never really been about the wins and the losses. I've been fortunate enough that as a player and early in my coaching career, I've been in really, high performance settings, but it's never really been about just winning and losing. It's about everything else. Do I feel like I can form a relationship with you? Do you feel comfortable enough to come to me and ask for help? And so that's the kind of really important thing. And then we had to bring in some athletes. We had to bring in some good kids. So we're really confident. Like, our first win of the season, we didn't have many of them, but our first win of the season was against PEI, and they placed third this year at nationals, right? So like we were competing, but maybe some people who listen to this would agree, like, you never really been asked to play defense before. You're playing against, women who are 4 or 5 years older than you that know how to use their bodies. There's a lot of changes there, right? Confidence, and you got to shred it. But we just stuck with that message. Listen, this is the here and now. It's okay to fail. This is gonna lead us to our future. You look at that PEI team. Matt Gavin does a great job with them. But when you look at their key players in year one, they're losing by 20, 30 points because they're rookies and they got to play. And so I really believe that in the long term,
huge.
Yeah, I'm super pumped up. Yeah, and bringing in young women like Elizabeth Kennedy, I mean, you're talking about high character, work hard, outstanding leadership qualities. That's a kid that's only going to get better. And those are the kind of kids that we're recruiting to contribute to our class as well.
Well, and you know what? The best like to be around the best, right? And so it's a mentality thing. If people are hanging around and they see, people who are hardworking, dedicated, put in the time, good in the classroom, it rubs off on them, and they rub off. It's like everybody wants to be around that situation. So it's definitely a positive. It's going to be exciting going forward. So let me ask this question. One of the things I asked before we wrap up, if you could go back in time and give young Lee a little bit of advice, what would you tell her as she was growing up?
I mean, there's so much I would say. Honestly, I think for me personally, the thing that I struggle with the most is and given the social climate, right, like of Black Lives Matter and all that, is how do you help your family? How do you help your senior mother that works 5 or 6 days a week? How do you get out of this intergenerational kind of cycle of poverty? And I think from the outside in, it's really easy to kind of characterize and I got an amazing job, but it's like that gap is so large that it's just so hard. As a West African first generation citizen, like coming up, I didn't get any support for athletics, mostly because my mom didn't believe in it. Like, girls have to wash dishes and so forth. And it was able to pay for my school to an extent. But it's so difficult because you don't have everybody who's willing to open doors. Like, where would I be if I didn't get this job, and I was still kind of making a couple $100 every 2 weeks. It's such a challenge. And many people, I'm fortunate enough to love what I do. But it's like a lot of what I earn goes into maintaining and sustaining, back home as well as here, and then student loans. And so one of the things that I challenge with internally is, finding a way to kind of tap into some resources earlier, maybe financial literacy earlier, thinking about investments. And I mean, I'm not like, I wouldn't consider myself super old, but I'm old enough to think back and be like, man, I wish I would have just started a bank account in that, grade 11 English classroom when our teacher wrote how to be a millionaire by the time you're 40. I wish I would have taken it a little bit more.
Really, you had a teacher actually write that on the board, huh?
Yeah. Mr. Sekulovich at Eastern Commerce. Yeah, he would come in and This is how you become. He does it beginning of every year, and it's all about just putting money away each month, and
Wow.
you know,
I never
and
had
I
a
think
teacher like that. I take one of those. Yeah.
now Mr. Zakulovich, he never really taught English. He taught us life skills. That's what we would like to say, right? And,
I was gonna say, you don't usually hear that from your English teacher. But you know,
Yeah.
what I've heard from you today is you got to find a way to persevere. And realistically,
for sure.
diamonds are made, you know, from pressure. And you got to find a way to figure it out. And it's not going to go easy. It's not going to go smooth. It's going to be difficult. But if you can stick it out, if you can have the perseverance and the fight, it's gonna, you know, you can turn that corner. And you know, I'm excited to see your program the next few years. I think you guys are, you know, playing so many young kids. I think it's going to be, you know, it's an opportunity. If you're a player, this is a place you want to go play, in my opinion, because you're going to get an opportunity to show if you can play. Listen, like Coach Calipari says all the time, if you can play, I can help you. If you can't play, if you can't play, you know, there's nobody that can help you. And so if you can play, this is going to be a great spot for you to kind of take your game to the next level. And I'm excited to see that. The other thing that, you know, you touch base on is giving back to your community, going to the old folks' homes, finding ways to be positive influences in your neighborhood. Such an important thing that a lot of kids kind of miss out on, and it kind of don't really appreciate it till later. So giving kids those opportunities, such a great advantage for them, honestly. Like, you know, one of the things, you know, people are, why you coach all the time? And it's like, I like it. I get something out of it. You know, I enjoy the camaraderie, the atmosphere. And I think, you know, giving back, going to the old folks' homes, you know, building the junior basketball program with your you know, StFX group. What a fantastic opportunity. So thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your story today. It's been fantastic. I picked up a bunch of tidbits. I've written down a bunch of things. I'm excited. I thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it. Go BK.
There we go. We'll take it.